Will my game's music generation system be able to create the most intricate aspect of a song? The bassline. But first things first, what are we even talking about? Welcome back. Last time, I showed you the foundations of my new game, Rebel Radio. I talked about the inspiration and how I want the game to be able to create its own music, for no other purpose than to give the game a fresh mechanic based around the songs you create right there in the moment. We talked about the game's musical systems, and since then, things have grown, quite literally. Today, I want to take you behind the scenes of how the chord progression system evolved, how the bassline generation took shape, and why a song, much like a forest, is a collaboration of living parts. The first version of the chord progression generator worked, technically, but although music is governed by numbers and math, it doesn't live in the technical. It lives in motion, tension, release. The things you hear before you ever think about them. So the problem is I'm getting these chord progressions that feel like they feel musical, like they fit in the scale, but they don't fit, like they just seem too mathematical. So I rewired the system to behave less like a calculator and more like a songwriter. Instead of the chord progression system giving you the order of the chords randomly, it now relies on a database of progressions that not only fit in musically and mathematically, but I would even dare say spiritually. Now each chord has preferences, tendencies, little instincts, and when they interact, they create progressions that sound intentional, even when they're still randomly assembled. So yeah, now these chord progressions feel much more musical. They have like a cadence to them. They're still mathematically correct. They're still like in the scale, but now they're not like so randomly generated. They have a harmonic library to choose from, and I think it sounds a bit more natural. But before anything else, I want to make something absolutely clear. I am not trying to replace what real music does. I'm not trying to substitute the work of composers, or replace the kind of crafted emotional writing that makes games, movies, and records unforgettable. Some of the best art I've heard in years comes from these composers, and I will never stop appreciating the mastery and heart that goes into their work. What I'm building here isn't meant to compete with that. It's something different. It's a tool tailored for this game, for this world. An engine that reacts, transforms, and listens to the player, something that, as far as I know, hasn't been built to this extent for this specific purpose. Honestly, I could do an entire video just about that, about how video game music is often the peak of its art form, the way it adapts, guides, and breathes alongside the player. It's incredible. It deserves all the praise and respect in the world. My goal here is much simpler. I just want to create a mechanic you haven't seen before. A ship that doesn't just travel through space, but makes music while doing it. Music shaped by your decisions, your stats, or the objectives of each level. You could even look at it as me composing the soundtrack, just giving you, the player, a little bit more room to shape it. More possibilities, more variations, more ways for the music to feel like it belongs to your journey. So that being said, I started to create the UI for the chord progression generator, which is just a simple scale selection tool, which I named the scales more thematically to fit the whole space vibe. And now you can generate your chord progressions, and it's here when I realized that it all sounded a little bit weak and thin, so I needed some mixing. And essentially it's just making sure the volumes are correct, a bit of equalization, compression, a little bit of effects here and there, reverb, some mixing magic, and now it sounds much more like an actual song. And it's sounding a little bit better each time. Once the chords were alive, the bass now needed a voice. Not just a note under a song, but a trunk that holds it all together. I built a system that reads the chord progression and shapes the bass line around it, choosing movement based on mood, intensity, and register. So let's imagine we have a grid of 16 steps. And let's say the chord progression generator gave us 4 chords on step 1, 5, 9, and let's say 15, just to give it a bit off tempo. So essentially it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Now the first thing that the bassline generator will do is put a bass note each time a chord is played. So in this case it would be on step 1, 5, 9, and 15. That will always make sure that the chord has a solid structure to it. Then it will determine the space between the chords, and depending on this knob over here, it will determine the probability of there being notes in those steps in between. The higher the knob, the more probability there will be of there being a bass note there. If it's to 0, then basically you'll just have a progression that just plays when the chords play, which is fine, but sometimes you want a bit more groove, who knows. Now the bass notes that are played with the chords, like I said, are usually the roots, the 3rd or the 5th, but the ones in between move through the scale to give the bass a bit more dimension, musicality, harmony, and it's usually what gives bass lines such a special character. They can move freely through the scale without affecting anything else. This is what gives the bassline generator the magic, if you will. And yes, after a small battle with Fmod, the bass cutoff finally behaves the way it should. But these systems are just the surface. Underneath all of this is a simple idea I keep returning to. A song isn't one thing, it's many things growing together. In the forest, nothing stands alone. The roots anchor the tree just as the drums anchor a song. Steady, invisible, but essential. The trunk rises from them, paving the way to where the tree wants to grow, solid and dependable. The way the bass holds everything together. Branches spread outward like harmonies and chords, shaping the form and character. And at the very end, the leaves, fragile, expressive, ever-changing. These are the melodies, the little details that catch the light. And yet, even though each new part feels like a product of the latter, it all connects in a much deeper way. The leaves, or melodies, are usually the last ones to grow out of a tree, but they are essential in collecting light to give the tree energy. And so, even the old roots depend on this connection with the newly formed leaves. So, when I'm building these systems, I'm not thinking of them as isolated mechanics. I'm thinking of them as a living structure. The bassline depends on the chords. The chords depend on the rhythm. The rhythm gets nurtured by the melody. The melody itself only works if it's in sync with the rhythm. Everything just depends on everything. My job is to help these parts communicate, for them to grow together. That's where things stand today. The musical engine is getting smarter, the systems are getting tighter, and little by little, the world of the game is learning how to play music the way we do, organically. So, what do you think? Any ideas, improvements, or just random conversation? Drop it in the comments below. I will create the Discord eventually when I have a solid build of the prototype so you guys can play it and perhaps give me feedback. But thanks for following along. Devlog 3 is going to dive into the next steps of the journey, working on the leads, the drum patterns, and perhaps even starting to get all these layers to react dynamically to gameplay. Who knows? See you later.